Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leaders Playlist. My name is Renee Craven, and today David Clifford and I are discussing the book Slack by Tom DeMarco. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, Renee. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Dave. How are you?
I'm good.
That's good. Today we are discussing the book Slack by Tom DeMarco, Getting Past Burnout, Busy Work, and the Myth of Total Efficiency.
Good book.
It is a good book. It's a short book, so it is, about 200 pages, 200 pages of gold, I would say. I know when I was reading this book, I would go, oh, yes. And I've got so many Post-it notes and pieces highlighted in this book. I reckon there's more highlighted than there is not highlighted now.
Yeah, I've got to say, if I was to do a chart of books and looked at the small little books that you get, like Humble Inquiry and things like that, and this Slack, and this again, another book written a while ago, small things. So they compare to the stuff you get in universities and college where they give you a big, huge, like 800-page textbook and you get virtually no value out of it. And it's pain in the ass reading. With this, I don't know, I was just like, oh my God, yeah, that's it. Like, I've seen that. I've seen that as well. I understand.
Yes. And I've recommended this book so many times to lots of people, but doing different roles. Didn't matter if they were Scrum Masters or product owners or coaches. I recommend this book to so many people. So is that it? That's the world's shortest book discussion. Get it, read it. It's awesome.
It ties in nicely to the last book review podcast, which is where we kind of got the prompt to read this book. Again, it was from Josh. And I can see, and I don't know if you could, but by reading through it, that joy of agility is definitely, you can see a lot of inspiration from this book, Slack. As I said, it's crazy that these books have been going around for ages, yet you could compare this to an organization today. I've only probably had a meeting about 10 minutes ago. I could really benefit from the person reading this book.
Yeah, as you said, it's pretty old. It was published in 2001, I believe, and then it was released in 2002.
Well, I think, could I jump in? I think the key, like for me, when I was reading the book, they had the 4 key things that you do if you introduce Slack into your organization, what you should get, right? What's the benefits?
Before we jump into that, though, what is Slack? What does he mean by Slack?
What does he mean by Slack? For me, the space to reflect, the thing, not to be fully optimized.
So in the very first chapter, on the very first page, and spoiler alert, but he uses the image of one of those old puzzle games. Remember those old tiled puzzle games where there's like 9 numbers and you got to get them in order and you've got one space free and you use that space to move all the little tiles around until you get them in some kind of order. And sometimes they were pictures, other times they were numbers, whatever it was. And it's that image. So he's calling Slack that spare space, that one spare space that you need in order to move those puzzle pieces around. There's a couple of times in the book he mentions different definitions for Slack. One of them is the trade-off between efficiency and flexibility, or it's the degree of freedom required to affect change.
Lister's law. People under time pressure don't think faster. What they do is they eliminate wasted time, they defer tasks not on the critical path, and they also stay late. Wow. Interesting.
But so staying late, that's a good thing. That means you're working hard, right?
Because you're working hard, yes.
Look at all the extra overtime you do. You're such a model employee. I wish everyone worked as much as you did.
Overtime, right? What happens with overtime? People, I think it's a false thing, right? So there's a reduced quality. We always know the longer people hours, the more, the personal burnout, right? You increase turnover in your staff. They go, right? Because no one wants to spend 12 hours that. And then the other thing, which I found really was one of the other things, said the effective use of time during normal hours. And I was like, what's he trying to get at there? To me, when I think about that and I look at it, that ineffective use is the person knows they're going to be going to work late, and it looks good to them, to their employers, if they work late, because they're doing, the 9 to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night kind of scenario, where during the day there's no focus at work, there's no urgency to get it completed, so they're happy to do it, and but apart from that, so if they finish at 5, right, someone else can pick up the work, or they finish the time with that. But if they stretch it out till 10, then someone can't start it until the next day. So I think there's a little knock-on effect.
Yeah.
The other part of all that overtime and all thing is, of course, what's very prevalent at the moment is mindfulness and mental health and all of these things that I don't think you touched on. It's been personal burnout, but you lose time with your family, you lose time with things that are important to you, your friends, all of that. And I think, to me, having slack in your work day to have some of that, or your work week, I should say, to enjoy that and know that you can just put off at that 5 o'clock is good. But again, I don't witness it too often, especially from my own personal experience. I know that being a consultant, you're expected to bill 40 hours a week, and then anything over that is, sales work or anything like that is, if you got to do pretty much on your own time.
Yeah, and you don't get that time to switch off. There's no break. And I think COVID kind of made that worse because people had to set up an office in their home, whether they had the space for an office or not. I know in my early days of COVID, I worked from my dining room table in the lounge room area, and so at nighttime when I was having dinner or watching TV or whatever, I could always see my workspace, and it was so easy just to go over and I'll just check my email, or I'll just do this, or I'll just do this, because it was there. So you never really switched off. You never closed the door and I can't see work anymore. Therefore, I'm now in home time. So I had to separate it. I had to stick it reconfigure the house so that I could be in a closed room, and then I could switch off from work. But a lot of people don't have that luxury, and it is really hard to switch off. And it's worse when there's that expectation from employers to do extra stuff over and above what you've already done during the day. And it adds up. It adds up over time. It eats into your personal life, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely hard to switch off working from home and that COVID stuff, because you're expecting, there was some benefits of it. You probably lose the commute and everything like that. But instead of having slack, as in taking time out, you'd end up doing chores or doing something else. There was always something to do. Chores, they're always going to be there, right? But you're always trying to fit it in. So you actually end up working longer, trying to fit in everything in. But you don't have that slack just to that learning, reinvention. All that stuff takes time, right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of just sit in a room, sit in the dark, or whatever you want to do, have a walk.
Yeah.
And just take the time out.
So I cut you off before. What are the benefits of having slack?
Well, yeah, benefits. And again, another kind of zinger at the end, which you wouldn't really think about. So, of course, increased organization and agility, better retention of key personnel. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute, because I know there's probably a term that you like in the book, that is another term that you really despise. An improved ability to invest in the future. That sort of thing. And then a capacity for sensible risk taking instead of risk avoidance.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another one, the same sort of other list, thinking about that. Well, what the hell does that mean? Right.
Having the space to think about risks, or you're willing to take or not. I think that's what it means to me anyway, the sensible part, as opposed to, I've seen the practice now where a lot more people are raising risks, which is good, but they just raise them and then they just go into some kind of risk backlog, and they're kind of just doing it to say they've done it to tick that box, but they're not actually doing that, don't have the time to think about whether or not this is a risk that we need to raise, or can it be factored into something that we're doing right now as a team.
Yeah. Well, all of that stuff is just that risk avoidance. I see that all the project managers create the risk registers, doing all that. They hardly talk about it. They put in these controls and treatments, and the risk is managed. Where in reality, it's not risk taking, or it's actually just reactive. They're just going to be reactive to the risk. The risk is going to happen, but they won't have the mechanisms to mitigate it. And when you look about or think about the story in Josh's book about the Apollo 13, right?
Yeah.
They sensibly took an approach to risk. They knew that was a risk that had a major impact, and they got the team ready for it. So they weren't reacting to it, or they didn't avoid it. They knew it was coming. Yeah, but risk is not really a sexy topic, is it? No one really likes talking about risk.
No.
But what is so? Human capital. What do you think of that term?
I liked that very much. It's interesting because it came up recently in a post that I was reading about with around all the redundancies happening and things like that, where organisations, people and reducing headcount is the first thing that they think about when they need to reduce cost. They're not thinking of humans as, I guess, to use Tom's words, capital. They're thinking of them as resources that they can get rid of.
Yeah, it's a lot better than the one term I know you hate, resources and human resource management and all of that. Just sounds
yes
terrible.
Yes. Tom says money is fungible. Now, that's a fun word. Let's just look at what the definition is of that. Being of such nature or kind as to be freely exchangeable or replaceable, in whole or in part for another of like nature or kind. He says money is...
clear as mud.
Yeah, I know. I just read the definition from the book. Money is fungible. You can take it out of one pile, say maintenance, and add it to another pile, say groceries, without any net loss in the transfer. But people aren't fungible. Knowledge workers aren't fungible. Treating them as if they are will increase busyness, but it'll make it harder for them to get useful work done.
Yeah. And to that, I think it was in the same chapter they talked about the kind of connectives of workers. They call them star workers, which is a topic I like, talking about social networks within organizations. But they said that into that, these star workers are, manage the network of their connections throughout the organization, and they get the benefit of it. People respond to them quicker. People, answer their questions, attend their meetings, all of that stuff. And how did they do that? Simply, they did favors to other people. They were responsive to other people's needs. They looked after those relationships, and they looked after other people's human needs, which is like back to that human capital. And as you just said, they looked after the people, not the money, not the shifting it around the organization, all of that. They actually just looked after the people. Not a lot of happening organizations at the moment either.
No, it's not.
Pockets of it. But that's what I think. That's leadership now, has to move from that transactional relationship with the employees to a more, open, connected one. See the people as...
Yeah.
I think that's...
He has some stuff in here as well, some good chapters on management and leadership and middle management and things like that as well, which... I don't know. There's so much good stuff in this book.
There is.
We could make this podcast hours long, but you may as well just read the book and you'll finish it in a couple of hours.
Yeah. There's loads of things. It's like the first law of bad management, second law of bad management.
Yeah.
And you see it, like, well, once again, if something isn't working, do more of it.
So one of the things that eats into that slack time is task switching, which is something that we come up against this a lot as coaches with teams of people who aren't 100% in the team. They're split across multiple teams, and there's some science behind why task switching is bad. But Tom does have a calculation in this book just as I thought it would be worth the penalty, task switching penalty, is the mechanics of moving to a new task plus rework due to an inopportune abort, plus immersion time for think-intensive tasks, plus the frustration, in brackets, emotional immersion, plus the loss of team binding effect. That's your task switching penalty. And he touches on those immersive tasks. And straight away when I read that, I thought of, what do we do that are immersive tasks? We do things like discovery. We do planning, whether it's sprint planning or quarterly planning or some kind of planning, any kind of planning that requires a different way of thinking. Our retrospectives, when we're having those with our teams, and getting people to be fully present in especially a retrospective, to reflect and come up with things that they can try and all of that sort of stuff. So there's this frame of mind that you need when you're doing an immersive task, and it's usually you need a large block of time to do it. And therefore, during the day, when you're task switching 4,000 different tasks, you don't have time to do those. Either you don't have time to do them properly, or you like the time you need, or you put them off to what you were talking about before, the normal hours, when you put them into the after business hours, so that you do have a bit of quiet time so that you can concentrate and do what you need to do. Otherwise, if you've got so much on your plate that you don't have time to spend on that, then we're going to see bad outcomes and flow-on impacts.
It's funny. What I think about, I've just witnessed it the last couple of weeks. Teams new to Scrum coming into it. There's a sprint, time box, activities happen within. You have the planning, your review, your retro, things like that. And it was funny that I was listening to the discussion in the retro of the team, which were basically questioning the value of the ceremonies. That they've only been running it 2 weeks, and their solution to it, our thing, was to remove planning from the first day of the sprint and put it into the last day of the sprint. And then, as all normal, the thing that they always seem to drop is the retro. We're not seeing any value, which is the prime thing, is the slack put in there, right? It's the slack to be able to think, right? To be able to look at it at different perspectives, kind of understand the patterns, come up with new ideas, come up with experiments and all that. And I could really put a playbook for like the first 6 weeks of implementing Scrum into a team or an organization, because you get the same thing. It's a pattern, but definitely they start to optimize everything. They think that like taking the time to do the planning, and I know it's not about 2 weeks, it's 3 hours. Taking that time to fully understand the tasks and break it down before you work is better than going through the tasks and seeing, oh, shit, we didn't really have to take the time that when there's a lot of unknown work, or bringing in the law of marginal gains and introducing an experiment. It's just like it goes through the same thing. It's a cycle, and I think it's organizations will put that on now. You have to be 100% optimized. You need to be working, and meetings take away from that. Yet, if you go to someone's calendar in an organization that says they have to be fully optimized, their calendar is fully booked, chock full of meetings from 9 to 5. It makes sense, right?
Yeah. Tom does talk about the meeting culture, the oversized meeting culture he's talking about, though. It's kind of different, but kind of the same. It's still about meetings, but the oversized meeting culture are those big meetings where there's people, like 20 plus people in there, and 18 of them are sitting there either not listening, or they don't speak, or they don't ask questions, and you kind of go, why are you here? Because it was in my calendar, or because I was invited. If we draw on Patrick Lencioni's book of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, we want to see healthy debate happening. I bet there's lots of meetings that you could just go, well, no, I'm not an active participant. I'm interested in the outcomes or decisions made, but maybe I can just find out what decisions were made after the meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. I guess saying those calendars are fully booked. They probably don't need to be at all of those meetings. Don't add anything. But yet it's busyness, right? They're busy because, oh my God, I can't get that person. I tried to book a meeting with someone in this organization and they can't see me till mid-September. This is like mid-August.
Yeah.
Because their calendar is so full.
Yeah.
So maybe they don't want to see me. That could be a point. But
that's possible.
That is possible. But who would not want to see me? Yeah, but I think it is. And the thing is then when you look at all of that, you look at all the meeting culture, you look at having Slack, having to be fully optimized. And then we worry why companies are not responsive to change. And we wonder why they can't invent new products and they kind of exploit their existing products because that people are just too busy doing stuff that doesn't really matter. They're not focused on important things. Another example, like I said, exec team I ran an offsite for, they were completely busy, like 10-hour days, but they were in the weeds of stuff that they didn't need to be in. And when we showed it to them, they were like, oh shit, why am I doing this? I don't need to be involved in this.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee 3 weeks later, they'd still be back into that weeds and be working at those 60-hour weeks.
Yeah.
So then what happens with that is change. You assess change in an organization. It needs to be proactive change, not reactive change, which is where the most of organizations are at the moment. It's reactive, right? They've not planned for it and have thought about it. But the thing is, with proactive change, you can't make it happen. You have to create the conditions for it to happen. Now, most organizations, back to the thing, one, when it does change, no slack in it.
Yeah. It's
run like a project. There's no reflection normally, nothing. Everyone's busy. You seen any examples of that, Renee?
Not recently, no. I mean, I think there have been some good intentions of creating change, but it's very much been driven or pushed from the top. And I think the enemy of that proactive change, or the thing that was that is undoing that attempt at proactive change, is no slack time. So it kind of feels at the team level and at the tribe level, it kind of feels like it's just reactive, and the intent or the purpose for the change is completely lost, because it's getting pushed down as processes. And there's a section in this book around process standardization, and he says process standardization from on high is disempowerment. It is a direct result of fearful management allergic to failure. It tries to avoid all chance of failure by having key decisions made by a guru and carried out mechanically by the regular folk.
The guru? Sounds like a cult.
The guru.
I think there's in that chapter, because it's the quote by biologist Fisher, I think his name is, where he goes, the more highly adapted an organism becomes, the less adaptive it is to any new change. And that's the thing. More standardization across the organization, all of that stuff where they call it an uplift, but actually uplift is just a fancy term for standardization. It's impossible to react, right? Because you've got another new change that doesn't fit into the existing processes and procedures. And if you don't have slack in that, then, you can't grow if you can't change at all.
Yeah.
So you definitely recommend this, but who would you recommend it to?
I've recommended this to people who have lots of different roles, especially mentioned it to Scrum Masters, and I've recommended it to coaches, Agile coaches. But I think, and leaders as well, I think it would benefit all kinds of role. What about you?
Yeah, because he says it's for the handbook for managers, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. But I definitely think, for me, I think everyone should read it. I definitely think managers, people in general, would benefit from reading this, not for their work life, but for their work life. Yeah, it's good, but for personal life as well. And understand that if you're busy in personal life and work life, 100% healthy, your risk of personal burnout is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's whether it's work seeping into your personal life or whether your personal life is just too hectic, then you also need to take slack. And that means going on holidays where there's no Wi-Fi, take a book, whatever, just get away from it all. But yeah, I would recommend it for everyone.
There's two sentences, were my two favourite sentences in the book that I thought we might close this episode with. Learning and reinvention takes time. If people are too busy doing the work, they will never have the time to learn new ways to approach it. The difference between the time it takes you to arrive at all prudent speed and the time it would take you at breakneck speed is your slack. Slack is what helps you arrive quickly, but with an unbroken neck.
What was that first one again?
Learning and reinvention takes time. If people are too busy doing the work, they will never have the time to learn new ways to approach it.
So that when I was reading that particular thing, I heard it was called courage. The man said, courage is creativity. And when I think about that, the courage to say no to stuff, because if you're always saying yes, you're always going to be the decision maker, you're always going to be the person that people go to or a thing, then you can be more creative. You give that space for that creativity. Now, that's my take on that. Might not be everyone's take on it, but I thought I've been trying to work on that, thinking about that for weeks going, what does he actually mean by that? And I think some of it sits with that, having the courage to say no, because I personally, I can't be creative if I am at 100% fine.
Was that a light bulb moment for you there, Dave?
I have a few of them now and then. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Till next book.
Yes. Thank you, Renee. Always fun.
Thank you for listening to the Leaders Playlist. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to share our podcast with your family, friends, and work colleagues. Until next episode.